Arthur's daughter forgot to hang up the phone. He heard it's time for him to go to a nursing home. He's a burden. Arthur didn't say anything, but at that moment, something in him broke. He sold the house for $890,000. They came back from a business, Tripp smiling, but there was a surprise waiting for them. The keys did not fit the door. They found a note on the doorstep, and after reading it, they started screaming. And then Arthur realized they wouldn't just leave it alone. This was just the beginning. The phone rang just as he was scraping the last of the meatloaf from his plate. Martha's meatloaf recipe, though his never tasted quite right without her touch. He glanced at the caller ID and smiled despite himself. Isabella. "Dad, how are you holding up?" Her voice carried that familiar warmth that always made his chest tighten with love and loneliness. Arthur settled into Martha's old recliner, the leather worn smooth from years of her evening reading sessions. "Oh, you know me, sweetheart. Just finished dinner and was about to watch the news." He didn't mention it was leftovers from 3 days ago, or that he'd been staring at Martha's photo on the mantel for the better part of an hour. "Are you eating enough? You know you can always order groceries online now, right? I showed you the app." "I'm eating plenty," he interrupted gently, though he had a little scare yesterday. "Forgot to turn off the burner under my coffee pot. Good thing I smelled it burning from the living room." There was a pause. He could picture her frowning in that way she'd inherited from her mother, the same little crease between her eyebrows. "Dad, maybe we should talk about getting someone to check on you more regularly." "I'm fine, Isabella." "Really? How's your business? Trip going? You're in San Francisco, right?" "Yes, the conference ends tomorrow. Leo's been handling most of the client meetings while I sit through these endless presentations about digital marketing trends." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Listen, Dad, I should probably get going. Leo and I have dinner plans with some potential investors." "Of course, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too, Dad. Take care of yourself, okay?" Arthur heard a click, then rustling sounds. She must have dropped the phone in her purse, he thought, reaching to hang up his end. But then he heard voices, muffled, but clear enough through her phone's microphone. "Leo, you see how he's deteriorating." Isabella's voice, no longer warm and caring. "He forgot to turn off the stove yesterday. What if he burns the house down?" Arthur's hand froze on the receiver. Ice spread through his chest. "It's time for a nursing home, Isabella." Leo's voice, cold and matter-of-fact. "He's becoming a burden, and you know it. Your dad's a good man, but he can't live alone anymore. The house is worth almost $1 million now." Isabella's tone had shifted to pure calculation. "With Seattle's market, we could probably get $900,000, maybe more." "Exactly." Leo sounded pleased. "We could sell it, put him somewhere decent, not too expensive, and finally buy that house in Bellevue we've been looking at, the one with the mountain view." His daughter laughed. Actually laughed. "God, Leo, you should have seen him tonight. So grateful just to hear from me. He has no idea we're planning this. The longer we wait, the more confused he'll get. We should strike while he still trusts us completely." The phone slipped from his numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor Martha and he had installed together 23 years ago. Every board laid by his own hands, every nail driven with thoughts of their family's future. He sat in the sudden silence of his empty house, staring at Martha's photograph. Her eyes seemed to bore into his with an expression he couldn't quite read. Disappointment, warning, or maybe just the terrible knowledge that comes to those who've already left this world. The grandfather clock in the hallway, Martha's anniversary gift to him 15 years ago, ticked steadily in the growing darkness. Outside, the first spring crickets began their evening song in the garden Martha had planted, and he still tended. Something cold and hard settled in his chest, replacing the warmth he'd felt hearing his daughter's voice just moments before. His hands, weathered from decades of construction work, slowly curled into fists. They thought he was a burden. They thought he was confused, helpless, ready to be managed and discarded. They were already spending his money, already planning their new life in his grave. But he wasn't dead yet, and he wasn't nearly as confused as they believed. I don't know. How long he sat there in the dark, Martha's face watching him from the silver frame on the end table. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves had heard his daughter's betrayal and were holding their breath. His legs felt unsteady when he finally stood to turn on the lamp. The warm light fell across the living room they'd furnished piece by piece, each item chosen with care and saved for with sacrifice. The burgundy sofa where Isabella used to curl up doing homework. The coffee table he'd built in the garage, sanding it smooth while she played at his feet. He walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where he kept old receipts and papers. His fingers found the folder he was looking for without conscious thought. 20 years of financial records he'd never thrown away because Martha always said, "You never know when you might need them." University of Washington tuition receipts, $48,000 over 4 years. He remembered those double shifts, coming home with concrete dust in his hair and plaster under his fingernails. Martha would have coffee waiting and would massage his shoulders, while he paid bills at this very kitchen table. "Arthur, you're working yourself to death," she'd said one night, watching him calculate how to afford Isabella's spring semester. "She deserves better than we had, Martha. She's smart enough for anything." Martha had kissed the top of his head. "Just don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." He should have listened. God, he should have listened. The wedding receipts were in there too. $32,000 for one day. He told Isabella they could afford $5,000, maybe $8,000 if they stretched. But she'd cried, actually cried, about wanting her dream wedding. He'd worked weekends for 6 months installing hardwood floors for a contractor friend who paid him under the table. "Daddy, you're the best father in the world," she'd whispered during their dance, her head on his shoulder, her wedding dress rustling against his rented tuxedo. "I'll never forget this." But she had forgotten. Just like she'd forgotten who co-signed her first car loan when her credit wasn't good enough. Just like she'd forgotten who made the calls to get her that marketing job when she was unemployed for 8 months after graduation. He found the bank statements from 2 years ago after Leo lost his financial advisor position for reasons they never fully explained. They'd moved in temporarily, just until Leo found something new. He'd never charged them rent. He'd paid the increased utility bills, bought groceries for 3 adults instead of one lonely widower. Leo would pat his shoulder and call him the most generous man in Seattle. Isabella would hug him and say, "Dad, we'll pay you back when we get on our feet." They'd been on their feet for over a year now, both working good jobs, both making more money than he ever had. But they'd never mentioned moving out, never mentioned paying him back. The anniversary dinner he'd paid for last month, $200 at that fancy steakhouse downtown because Leo said they deserved to celebrate. The car repair bill he'd covered when Leo's BMW needed a new transmission, $3,000 that cleaned out his emergency fund. "Arthur's like a father to me," Leo had told his friends at their last barbecue, his arm around his shoulders. "I'm so lucky to have married into this family." He'd been proud, actually proud, to be the generous father-in-law, the man who took care of his family no matter what it cost him. He walked upstairs to Martha's and his bedroom, still unchanged after 2 years. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser, her reading glasses folded beside the lamp. He opened the bottom drawer where he kept their important papers and pulled out their original house deed. Arthur and Martha Hayes purchased 1999. No liens, no co-signers, no complications. His name only now that Martha was gone. Standing there in the bedroom where Martha had spent her last days, surrounded by everything they'd built together, he felt something shift inside him. The hurt was still there, sharp as broken glass, but underneath it, something harder was forming. They wanted to put him away and sell his life's work. They thought he was too old, too confused, too grateful for their attention to fight back. He looked at Martha's photo on the nightstand, remembering her voice from all those years ago. "Don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." Well, Martha, our daughter, had definitely forgotten, but she was about to remember that her old man wasn't as helpless as she thought. He walked to his home office and pulled out the business card he'd kept in his desk drawer for 3 years. Simon Black, real estate attorney. Martha had insisted they meet with him after her cancer diagnosis, just to make sure their affairs were in order. It was time for another consultation. The next morning, he walked through his house like a stranger, seeing it for the first time. But instead of seeing home, he was seeing what Isabella and Leo saw: square footage, market value, liquid assets. In the kitchen, he ran his hand along the granite countertop he'd installed himself, working by lamplight after his regular job because they couldn't afford to hire contractors. Martha had picked out the pattern, speckled gray with veins of gold that caught the morning light. She'd made coffee on this counter every morning for 16 years until the cancer took her strength away. He remembered the Christmas morning when 3-year-old Isabella took her first wobbly steps right here from the refrigerator to Martha's outstretched arms. They'd both cried with joy, Martha scooping their daughter up and spinning her around while he scrambled for the camera. "Our baby's walking in our house," Martha had whispered, tears streaming down her face. "In the house we built for her." The living room held 25 years of Christmas mornings. He could still see 7-year-old Isabella's face lighting up at the sight of the dollhouse. He'd spent 3 months building in the garage, working in secret after she'd gone to bed. Martha had sewn tiny curtains for the windows, made miniature furniture from cardboard and fabric scraps. "Daddy, it's just like our house," Isabella had squealed. And it was. He'd made it a perfect replica down to the little bay window in what represented her bedroom. That bay window had cost him 6 months of overtime. Martha had seen it in a magazine and fallen in love with the idea of reading there in the afternoons. He'd learned to cut angles he'd never cut before, measured and remeasured until his back ached from crawling around the frame. "Arthur, we can't afford this," Martha had worried when she saw him marking measurements on the wall. "You want it, you'll have it," he told her. "I'll make it work." He climbed the stairs to Isabella's old room, still painted the soft yellow she'd chosen for her 16th birthday, still decorated with photos of her high school friends and college memories. The room where he'd rocked her through colicky nights as a baby, where Martha and he had helped her, with algebra homework at the small white desk he'd built to fit perfectly under the window. The master bedroom was the hardest. Martha's side of the bed still had her water glass on the nightstand, her bookmarks still marking page 247 of the novel. She'd never finish. He'd built these walk-in closets with his own hands, custom designed to fit Martha's height perfectly. Her clothes still hung there, still smelling faintly of her perfume. This was the room where they'd planned their future, where they'd whispered about their dreams for Isabella, where Martha had died holding his hand while machines beeped around them. "Promise me you won't let them take advantage of you," she'd said near the end, her voice barely a whisper. "You're too good, Arthur. Too generous. Promise me you'll take care of yourself." He'd promised, but he hadn't kept that promise, had he? In his home office, he found the folder of construction photos Martha had kept, pictures of him laying the foundation in the spring of 1999, 25 years younger and 50 lb stronger. He and his crew installing the frame. Martha in her hard hat, bringing them lemonade on hot summer days, her belly just starting to show with Isabella. The financial records from those years told the story Martha's photos couldn't. Second mortgage. Personal loan from his brother. Martha taking a part-time job at the school district to help with materials costs. They'd eaten beans and rice for months, drove cars held together with prayer and duct tape. But they'd built this house with their sweat, their sacrifice, their love for each other and for the family they were creating. And now his daughter, the baby who'd taken her first steps in this kitchen, the child who'd played in the yard he'd landscaped by hand, wanted to sell it all and put him away like an inconvenient piece of furniture. He picked up Simon Black's business card from his desk drawer. The edges were worn from 3 years of handling, but the phone number was still clear. Isabella and Leo thought they were dealing with a confused old man who'd be grateful for any scrap of attention they threw him. They thought he was weak, helpless, ready to hand over his life's work without a fight. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. He dialed Simon's number and listened to it ring, his hands steady as stone. Outside, the spring morning was bright and clear, the kind of day Martha used to love, the kind of day for new beginnings. The law offices of Black & Associates occupied the second floor of a modest brick building on Aurora Avenue North, the kind of place that specialized in helping regular people with real problems rather than impressing corporate clients. He'd chosen his best suit, the charcoal gray one Martha had picked out for him to wear to her funeral, and arrived 15 minutes early, his hands only slightly trembling as he signed, in at the reception desk. Simon Black was younger than he'd expected, maybe 55, with graying temples and the patient demeanor of a man who'd heard every family horror story twice. His office was lined with law books and family photos, a wife, 2 teenagers, a golden retriever, the kind of normal life Martha and he had tried to build. "Mr. Hayes, good to see you again." Simon poured coffee from a small machine in the corner, the rich smell filling the space between legal documents and filing cabinets. "I remember you and Martha from a few years back. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." He accepted the coffee, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "I need to discuss something delicate about my daughter and son-in-law." Simon settled behind his desk, pen ready. "I'm listening." Arthur told him everything. The phone call, the overheard conversation, their plans to sell his house and put him in a nursing home. Simon's expression never changed, but Arthur caught him shaking his head slightly when he described their eagerness to spend his money on their Bellevue dream house. "Unfortunately, Mr. Hayes, this scenario is more common than you'd think." Simon set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. Adult children often assume they know what's best for their aging parents, especially when valuable assets are involved. But they can't actually do anything, can they? I mean, legally. Let's start with the basics. The house is titled in your name only since your wife's passing. Correct. That's right, Martha and I owned it jointly, but when she died, it transferred to me automatically. Then, legally speaking, your daughter and son-in-law have absolutely no claim to your property. They cannot sell it, cannot force you into a care facility, cannot make any decisions about your assets without your explicit consent. Simon pulled a legal pad from his drawer and began making notes. The house belongs to you. Period. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by something sharper. So, if I wanted to sell it myself, you could put it on the market tomorrow if you chose to. It's your property, your decision. Simon looked up from his notes. May I ask why you're considering that option? Arthur thought about Isabella's laugh when she'd called him a burden, about Leo's cold calculation of his worth, about 25 years of sacrifice reduced to a real estate transaction. They think I'm helpless, confused. They think they can manage me like a piece of property. His hands clenched around the coffee cup. Maybe it's time I showed them exactly how sharp my mind really is. Simon was quiet for a moment, studying his face. Seattle's housing market is incredibly strong right now, especially in your neighborhood. Properties are selling within days, often for cash offers above asking price. He paused. If you were serious about selling quickly before your daughter and son-in-law returned from their trip, how quickly could it happen? With the right buyer, and there are plenty of investors looking for properties like yours, we could have a sale completed within a week, maybe less. Simon leaned forward. But Mr. Hayes, this is a major decision. Once you sell, there's no going back. I built that house with my own hands, Mr. Black. Every board, every nail, every custom detail. I know exactly what I'm doing. They spent the next hour discussing practicalities, market value estimates, cash buyer networks, legal requirements, Simon explained that he could have everything prepared within 24 hours if Arthur was serious about proceeding. The consultation fee is $200, Simon said as Arthur prepared to leave. If you decide to move forward, that applies toward my legal fees for the sale. Arthur paid in cash, feeling more clear-headed than he had in months. Walking to his truck in the spring sunshine, he felt his phone buzz in his pocket. Isabella's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, he smiled. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. He could picture her in some hotel lobby in San Francisco, probably checking her watch, wondering why her grateful old father wasn't jumping to answer her call. Let her wonder. Let her and Leo make their plans about his future, his house, his life. They were in for the surprise of their lives. The phone kept ringing as he climbed into his truck, Simon Black's business card secure in his wallet, and a plan forming in his mind that would teach his ungrateful daughter exactly who she was dealing with. He had built his life from nothing once before. He could certainly tear it down and rebuild it on his own terms. The phone finally stopped ringing, but he knew she'd call back. She always did when she needed something from the old man. This time she was going to get much more than she bargained for. By the time he reached his driveway, confidence had replaced the tremor in his hands. Simon Black's words echoed in his mind. It's your property, your decision. 25 years of doubt and second-guessing had lifted like Seattle fog in the morning sun. He was unlocking his front door when the phone rang again. Through the window, he could see it buzzing against the kitchen counter where he'd left it. Isabella's name glowed on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, he smiled. Let her stew for a moment. Let her wonder why her grateful old father wasn't scrambling to answer. He poured himself a glass of water, took a deep breath, and picked up on the 6th ring. Dad, there you are. Isabella's voice practically sparkled, with artificial enthusiasm. I was starting to worry when you didn't answer earlier. Sorry, sweetheart. I was out running some errands. He kept his tone warm, grandfatherly. How's San Francisco treating you? Oh, you know how these business conferences are, but listen, I have the most wonderful news. She paused for dramatic effect. Leo and I have been planning something very special for you. He gripped the phone tighter, his knuckles going white. Oh? We want to treat you to a vacation. You deserve some rest and relaxation after everything you've been through since Mom died. Her voice carried that practiced sympathy he now recognized as manipulation. There's this beautiful place we found. It's like a resort, but with medical staff on hand, just in case you need anything. A resort with medical staff. His jaw clenched so hard he thought his teeth might crack. That sounds lovely, sweetheart. You really didn't need to go to such trouble for me. Nonsense. Your family. Leo's voice came through the background. He must have been listening on speakerphone. We've already made all the arrangements. When were you thinking? Arthur managed, knowing full well they wanted him gone before they returned to claim their inheritance. Well, we should be back by next Friday, Isabella said. We were hoping you could be ready by then. Just pack some clothes and personal items. You know, the essentials. The essentials? Not the photo albums Martha had lovingly arranged. Not the furniture he'd built with his own hands. Just the essentials for an old man being shuffled off to die. Actually, Isabella, I have a surprise for you, too. When you get back... Oh, Dad. What kind of surprise? She sounded genuinely pleased, probably imagining he'd signed papers or made their job easier somehow. Arthur walked to the bay window he'd built for Martha, looking out at the garden she'd planted, the porch swing, where they'd spent countless evenings planning their future. It's something I've been working on since our last conversation. I think you'll be very surprised. You're so sweet, Dad. We'll talk about everything when we get home. Okay, get some rest and we'll take care of everything else. Sweet, she called. Him sweet while planning to steal his life. I will, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Dad. See you Friday. The line went dead, and he set the phone down with hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. He walked to his home office and opened his laptop, the screen glowing to life with possibilities he'd never considered before. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before he typed, "Real estate agents, Seattle." The search results filled his screen like ammunition in a war he was finally ready to fight. He'd always been methodical. 25 years as a construction engineer had taught him to research thoroughly before making any decision. Tonight, that methodical nature would serve a different purpose. He clicked through agent profiles, comparing success rates and client testimonials, like he used to compare structural steel suppliers. Queen Anne, Ballard, University Hills, neighborhoods where houses sold for the kind of money Isabella and Leo were already spending in their dreams. One name kept appearing in the top results. Daniel Green, 43 years old, specialized in quick sales, averaged 18 days from listing to closing. His photo showed a professional smile and confident eyes, the kind of man who could make things happen, fast. His testimonials were exactly what he needed to see. Daniel sold our house in 6 days. Cash buyer lined up within 48 hours. Smooth closing, no complications. He stared at his direct phone number prominently displayed beneath his credentials. This was it, the moment that would set everything in motion. Once he made this call, there would be no going back to being the grateful, manageable old man his daughter expected. Martha's photo on his desk seemed to be watching him. He could almost hear her voice. "Arthur, are you sure about this?" He was. Sure, more sure than he'd been about anything since her funeral. He dialed Daniel Green's number with steady fingers. "Daniel Green, Green Real Estate. How can I help you?" "Mr. Green, my name is Arthur Hayes. I'm interested in selling my house quickly. How fast can these things actually happen?" "Well, Mr. Hayes, that depends on several factors. But with the right property and pricing strategy, I've closed deals in as little as 10 days with cash buyers." "What kind of timeline are you looking at?" 10 days? His heart hammered against his ribs. 10 days? That fast? Absolutely. Seattle's market is incredibly hot right now, especially for well-maintained properties in established neighborhoods. Can you tell me a bit about your house? He looked around his kitchen, seeing it through a buyer's eyes for the first time. 2-story, 3,400 square FT, built in 1999. Queen Anne area. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. I've maintained it well. Did most of the work myself over the years. Daniel's voice sharpened with interest. That sounds exactly like what several of my investors are looking for. Original owner, well-maintained, established neighborhood. Those are premium selling points. Would you be interested in a property assessment? How quickly could you come by? I can be there this afternoon if you're available. Say 3 Wast. He glanced at the clock. It was just past noon. 3Q works perfectly. Let me give you the address. After he hung up, he sat in the sudden quiet of his kitchen, the magnitude of what he'd set in motion beginning to settle in his chest. In 3 hours, a stranger would walk. Through the house Martha and he had built together, assigning dollar values to their memories. He spent the next 2 hours cleaning obsessively old habits from Martha's time when she'd insist the house be spotless for any visitor. He dusted the bay window, straightened the throw pillows on the couch, made sure every surface gleamed, but this cleaning felt different. He wasn't preparing for guests. He was preparing for an execution. At exactly 3 Ikask, the doorbell rang. He smoothed his shirt, took a deep breath that carried the scent of Martha's lavender sachets, still tucked in the linen closet, and walked toward the front door. His hand trembled slightly as it closed around the brass doorknob he'd installed himself 15 years ago. Beyond this door waited either his salvation or his damnation. He turned the handle and opened the door to his future. Daniel Green looked exactly like his photo, professional but approachable, early 40s, with the kind of confident bearing that came from years of successful deals. He carried a leather portfolio and tablet, and the moment he stepped inside, his eyes went wide. Wow. He stopped in the entryway, his gaze traveling up the crown molding Arthur had installed by hand to the hardwood floors Martha and he had selected together. "Mr. Hayes, this is exactly what I was hoping for." Arthur watched him take in the details. The way the afternoon light streamed through Martha's bay window, the seamless flow from living room to dining room that he'd achieved by removing a load-bearing wall and installing a beam. His appreciation was genuine, professional. You weren't kidding about maintaining this place. He pulled out his tablet and started taking photos. These hardwood floors throughout, original? Installed them myself in 2001. Martha wanted something that would last, so we went with 3/4-inch solid oak. He found himself falling into the familiar rhythm of discussing his work, proud despite everything that was happening. And this kitchen? Daniel stopped at the granite countertop, running, his hand along the edge. Custom installation. Every inch. Martha picked the pattern, said the gold veining reminded her of sunlight. His voice caught slightly. I spent 3 weekends getting the measurements perfect. Daniel was typing notes on his tablet, photographing the custom cabinets, testing faucets and outlets with the thoroughness of someone who knew what buyers wanted. "Mr. Hayes, I have to be honest with you. In my 15 years doing this, I rarely see properties maintained to this standard. I'm an engineer. Was an engineer. I believe in building things right the first time. It shows." He gestured toward the living room. "May I?" Arthur nodded, following him as he admired the open floor plan, the built-in bookcases flanking the fireplace, the way Martha's decorating choices had turned their construction project into a home. This bay window, custom work, built it for my wife. She wanted a reading nook. He could picture her there with her mystery novels and afternoon tea, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Daniel was taking measurements now, his excitement barely contained. "Mr. Hayes, I need to show you some comparable sales." He pulled up listings on his tablet. Similar properties in this area have been selling for $850 to $920,000. His chest tightened. That was more than Isabella and Leo had estimated in their cruel conversation. "But given the condition and custom features of your home, I'm thinking we price it at $890,000. That should move it quickly while getting you top dollar." $890,000. He sat down heavily in Martha's reading chair, the numbers spinning in his head. "That much?" he managed. "Mr. Hayes, you're sitting on a gold mine. Properties like this don't come on the market often, especially not in this condition." Daniel's voice carried the confidence of someone who knew his business. "I actually have an investment group that's been looking for exactly this type of property." "What kind of investment group?" "They specialize in high-quality rental properties and established neighborhoods. They pay cash, no financing contingencies, no repair negotiations. They can close in 10 business days." 10 business days. Isabella and Leo would return from Sant'Inition, Francisco in 8 days, expecting to find their grateful, manageable father ready to be shipped off to their resort. "What's the catch? Why so fast?" Daniel smiled. "No catch. Cash means no loan delays, no appraisal contingencies that could kill the deal. They do their own inspections, but frankly, your house is in better shape than most new construction I see." Arthur looked around the living room where Isabella had taken her first steps, where Martha and he had hosted Christmas mornings and birthday parties and quiet Sunday afternoons, reading the paper together. "When would I need to be out?" Standard contract gives you 30 days after closing, but they're flexible if you need more time. The main thing is getting clear title and completing the paperwork. He thought about Isabella's voice on the phone calling him sweet while planning to steal his life. He thought about Leo's cold calculation reducing him to a burden to be managed. He thought about Martha's warning about being too generous, too trusting. Let's do it. Daniel's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine excitement. Excellent choice, Mr. Hayes. Let me call them right now. Arthur watched him dial, heard him describe his property with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found buried treasure. Queen Anne area, original owner, immaculate condition, custom features throughout. He ended the call with a broad smile. They want to move forward immediately. I can have the initial contracts ready by tomorrow morning. The sun was setting. Through Martha's bay window, casting golden light across the room where Arthur just agreed to sell 25 years of his life. But for the first time since that devastating phone call, he felt something that had been missing for too long. Control. How does 9 a.m. sound? The question hung in the air like smoke, and he realized Daniel was waiting for an answer that would change everything. The grandfather clock in the hallway, Martha's 15th anniversary gift to him, ticked steadily in the silence. Kekawik-em. Sounds perfect. After Daniel left with promises of contracts and closing timelines, Arthur stood alone in the house that would soon belong to someone else. The evening light through Martha's windows painted everything golden, like a photograph of a life he was about to leave behind. But it wasn't sadness he felt. It was anticipation. Daniel arrived the next morning with contracts, a notary, and coffee for everyone. The kind of professional efficiency Arthur had always respected. He read every line with the thoroughness that had made him a good engineer, checking details the way he used to check blueprints. Sale price $890,000. Cash purchase, closing date, 10 business days from signing. The notary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, walked him through each signature. Minimal contingencies, just the title search and final walkthrough, and I can remain in the house for 30 days after closing if needed. That's correct, Mr. Hayes, though most sellers prefer to move out sooner rather than later, just for peace of mind. Peace of mind. He almost laughed. The only peace of mind he'd have would come from seeing Isabella and Leo's faces when they discovered what their burden had done. He signed his name with steady hands, and just like that, the process was in motion. The first 3 days passed in a blur of paperwork and inspections. The title company began their search through decades of records. The investors sent their team, a polite crew who admired his workmanship and found nothing to complain about. Your father-in-law really knew what he was doing, one of them told, the heir, since they assumed Arthur was already gone. These floors, this electrical work, all top quality. Days 4 through 6, Arthur became a man with a secret mission. He researched apartments online, looking for something small but comfortable, somewhere he could start over with nearly $900,000 in the bank. He found a place in Ballard, a senior community with golf courses and a community center, the kind of place Martha and he had sometimes talked about for their golden years. He also called storage facilities, planning which of Martha's things he'd keep and which he'd have to leave for the new owners, her china, definitely her jewelry box, the photo albums, the essentials of a life lived together. Days 7 through 9 brought a strange confidence he hadn't felt in years. Each morning he woke up knowing he was one step closer to freedom, one step closer to showing his daughter that her confused old father was sharper than she'd ever imagined. Mrs. Patterson from next door noticed the activity, asked about the inspectors and official-looking people. Just some work being done, he told her, hating the half-truth, but knowing the full truth would spread through the neighborhood before he was ready. On day 8, Daniel called with final confirmation. Everything's on track for tomorrow's closing, Mr. Hayes. The buyers are thrilled with the inspection results. Wire transfer will be completed the same day. You'll have access to funds immediately. That night, he packed a single suitcase with clothes and personal items, not because he was moving yet, but because he wanted to be ready for anything. He looked at Martha's photo in their dresser and whispered, "I hope you understand what I'm doing." Friday morning arrived bright and clear, the kind of spring day Martha used to say was Seattle at its finest. He dressed carefully in his best suit, not the funeral suit, but the navy one Martha had bought him for Isabella's college graduation. The title company office was all professional efficiency and congratulations. The buyers were represented by their attorney, a sharp woman who double-checked every document. Daniel handled the paperwork like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Mr. Hayes, if you'll sign here and here, an initial there." Each signature felt like cutting a chain: the deed transfer, the settlement statement, the final acknowledgement that 1247 Maple Street no longer belonged to Arthur Hayes, and "this is your wire transfer confirmation. $890,000 less closing costs has been deposited to your account." He stared at the numbers on the paper. More money than he'd ever seen in one place. More money than Isabella and Leo had dreamed their burden could access. They shook hands all around, everyone pleased with the smooth transaction. Daniel walked him to his truck, promising to stay in touch if he ever needed real estate services again. "You made the right choice, Mr. Hayes. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need." He drove home through neighborhoods he'd known for 25 years, past the elementary school where Isabella had learned to read, past the park where Martha and he used to walk every Sunday morning. But instead of nostalgia, he felt liberation. He pulled into his driveway and sat in his truck, looking at the house that was no longer his. The keys to the front door felt heavy in his palm, but tomorrow he'd hand them over to the new owners and walk away from this chapter of his life. Isabella and Leo were due back from San Francisco in 3 days. They'd arrive expecting to find their grateful, manageable father ready to be packed off to their resort. Instead, they were going to find an empty house and a lesson they'd never forget. He climbed out of his truck and walked toward his front door, reaching for his phone to make the next call in a plan that was working better than he'd ever hoped. The engine ticked as it cooled in his driveway, but he couldn't bring himself to turn it off. He sat staring at the house he'd built with his own hands, the house that now belonged to strangers, the house where Isabella and Leo expected to return and find their grateful, manageable father waiting to be shipped off. The keys to the front door felt like lead in his palm. New owners or not, he still had access for 30 days. Time enough to complete what he'd started. He drove to the Starbucks on Aurora Avenue North and parked in the lot, hands steady as he dialed directory assistance for a 24-hour locksmith. The emergency fee would cost an extra $200, but money was no longer a concern. A2A Emergency Locksmith. This is Eddie speaking. I need all my door locks changed today. It's urgent. What kind of time frame are we looking at, sir? As soon as possible. I can pay cash. I can be there in 2 hours. Address. Back at the house, he waited for Eddie in his truck, watching Mrs. Patterson water her garden next door. She waved, and he waved back, his chest tight with the knowledge that he was lying to everyone who cared about him. Eddie arrived in a van full of tools and hardware, a man in his 50s who'd clearly seen every kind of lock emergency Seattle had to offer. "Security issue, sir?" he asked, studying his front door. "New ownership situation. Better safe than sorry." He nodded like he'd heard it before and got to work. Arthur watched him remove the locks he'd installed 15 years ago, the brass hardware Martha had picked out because it matched their door knocker. "These are quality locks," Eddie commented as he worked. "Somebody knew what they were doing when they installed them." That was me. I like things done right. The new locks were silver instead of brass, modern instead of traditional. They clicked differently when Eddie tested them, a sharper, more mechanical sound than the old ones. "Here are your new keys, sir. 3 copies of each. Front door, back door, and garage side entrance." Eddie handed him a ring of keys that felt foreign in his palm. "That'll be $450 with the emergency fee." Arthur paid in cash from his wallet, knowing there would be no paper trail connecting Arthur Hayes to this transaction. After Eddie left, Arthur stood in his empty house and began the hardest part, packing 25 years of life into what he could carry. Martha's jewelry box went into his suitcase first, along with their wedding photos and the novel she'd been reading when she died. Bookmarks still marking page 247, his engineering certificates, their important documents, Martha's favorite cookbook with the handwritten notes in the margins. He left almost everything else. The furniture that told their story would have to stay. The photo albums chronicling Isabella's childhood. Martha's clothes still hanging in their closet, still carrying the faint scent of her perfume. While he packed, he called Beacon Hill Residences on his phone, explaining that he needed a furnished one-bedroom immediately. "We have a lovely unit, available for immediate occupancy," said Mrs. Chen, the property manager. "Month-to-month lease, if you prefer flexibility." "I'll take it." He met Mrs. Chen at the apartment complex an hour later. A modest but clean building designed for seniors with a community center and well-maintained grounds. The one-bedroom unit was simple but comfortable, furnished with everything he needed to start over. "Cash deposit is perfectly fine, Mr. Hayes. When would you like to move in?" "Tonight." Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't ask questions. He signed the lease and handed over first month's rent plus deposit. Nearly $3,000 that would have seemed impossible to spend casually just 2 weeks ago. Loading his car in the gathering dusk, he caught Mrs. Patterson watching from her window. She waved again, and he felt the weight of all the relationships he was severing, all the connections Isabella and Leo had forced him to cut. He took one last walk through the empty rooms, his footsteps echoing differently now that the house belonged to someone else. In the kitchen where Martha had taught Isabella to bake Christmas cookies, in the living room where they'd watched Isabella open presents on Christmas morning, in their bedroom where Martha had taken her last breath, while he held her hand. "I'm sorry, honey," he said aloud to Martha's memory, "but you'd understand. You always said I was too generous for my own good." He locked the new locks and drove away from Maple Street for what might be the last time, his rear-view mirror full of the life he was leaving behind. The sun was setting. When he arrived at Beacon Hill Residences, his car loaded with the essentials of his existence. He carried his suitcase to his new front door, fumbling with unfamiliar keys to unfamiliar locks. Inside the small apartment, he dropped his suitcase and immediately reached for his phone. The final phase of his plan required one more call. One more piece of the puzzle that would give Isabella and Leo the surprise of their lives. The apartment felt like a motel room, functional but soulless with generic furniture and the lingering smell of industrial carpet cleaner. He stood holding his phone, Martha's photo already positioned on the nightstand, trying to decide which bank would best protect nearly $900,000 from the children who thought they deserved it. He opened his laptop on the small dining table and began researching banks that specialized in large deposits. Puget Sound Trust caught his attention, smaller than the major chains with a focus on personal service and discretion. Exactly what he needed. Puget Sound Trust, Private Banking. Division, this is David Morrison. "Mr. Morrison, my name is Arthur Hayes. I need to open an account for a substantial deposit, around $890,000. The brief pause on the other end told him David was recalculating his day. "We'd be absolutely delighted to work with you, Mr. Hayes. When would be convenient for a consultation?" "Monday morning, 9 a.m. "Perfect. I'll have everything prepared." The weekend stretched ahead of him like uncharted territory. He'd never lived anywhere but the house Martha and he built together. This tiny apartment felt like exile, but it was exile by choice. His choice, not theirs. Saturday morning, he made coffee in the unfamiliar kitchenette and methodically unpacked his belongings. Martha's jewelry box on the dresser, his engineering awards on the bookshelf, their wedding photo beside the bed, where he'd sleep alone in a space that had never known Martha's presence. He drove to the grocery store and bought food for one person. Simple meals, nothing that required the kind of cooking Martha had loved. The checkout clerk, a young man with kind eyes, asked if he was new to the area. "Just moved in," he told him. "Starting fresh." Sunday morning, he discovered a coffee shop called Brews and Views, 3 blocks from his apartment. The barista, a young woman named Sarah with purple streaks in her hair, made the kind of strong coffee he preferred. "You're new around. Here," she observed, not prying, just friendly. "Retired engineer," he said, looking for a quieter life. "Well, you found the right neighborhood for that. Most of our customers are pretty mellow." He sat by the window with his coffee, watching. People walk dogs and push strollers, living the kind of normal Saturday morning that Martha and he used to treasure. But instead of sadness, he felt something he hadn't experienced in months: anticipation. Monday morning, he dressed in his best suit and drove to Puget Sound Trust. David Morrison was younger than he'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of professional warmth that came from handling people's life savings. "Mr. Hayes, what brings you to Puget Sound Trust?" "I recently sold my house. I need a fresh start with an institution that values personal relationships over transaction fees." David nodded, with genuine understanding. "We specialize in exactly that kind of service. Tell me about your needs." He explained his situation carefully. A widower who'd sold his family home and needed secure, accessible banking. David asked thoughtful questions, never prying beyond what was necessary for account setup. "I'll need to wire the funds from my previous bank," he explained. "No problem at all. We can initiate that transfer today, and the funds should clear by Wednesday." David prepared the paperwork with quiet efficiency. Online banking, debit card, and checkbook, all standard services. Given the amount, I'd also recommend our premium account package for additional security features. He signed documents that made him an official client of Puget Sound Trust, customer number 847293, with access to nearly $900,000 that Isabella and Leo would never see. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in the strange rhythm of his new routine. Morning. Coffee at Brews and Views. Sarah remembered his order and asked about his weekend. Afternoon, walks through the neighborhood, discovering a small park with benches where other retirees fed pigeons and read newspapers. Wednesday afternoon, David called with the news he'd been waiting for. "Mr. Hayes, your funds have cleared successfully. Your account is fully active." He hung up and looked around his small apartment, at Martha's photo watching him from the nightstand, at the simple life he was building from the wreckage of his daughter's betrayal. For the first time since Martha's death, he felt truly in control of his own destiny. Wednesday evening, he sat in his single chair. Not Martha's reading chair, not the recliner where he'd heard Isabella's betrayal, just a plain chair in a plain room that belonged entirely to him. He opened his laptop and typed "mini surveillance cameras" into the search bar. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, knowing that what he was about to order would capture the final act of his revenge. Isabella and Leo were returning on Friday, expecting to find their grateful old father ready to be managed. Instead, they were going to discover that their burden had become their biggest problem. The search results filled his screen with dozens of surveillance options, from obvious security, cameras to devices disguised as everyday objects. After 30 minutes of research, he found what he needed: a wireless mini-camera hidden inside what looked like a phone charger. The specifications were perfect for his engineering mind. Wi-Fi enabled with smartphone app control, motion-activated, recording, 12-hour battery life, and crystal-clear video quality. Most importantly, it could stream live footage directly to his phone from anywhere with internet access. He ordered it with expedited shipping, paying the extra $40 to guarantee Thursday delivery. The total cost was $149, an amount that would have made him hesitate 2 weeks ago, but barely registered now. With the camera ordered, he turned to the next crucial element: the note that would explain everything to Isabella and Leo when they discovered their keys no longer worked. The first draft was too angry, too raw with the pain of their betrayal. The second was too cold, missing the personal devastation they'd caused. By the third draft, he found the right tone: dignified, but devastating; loving, but final. He wrote in his careful engineer's handwriting, the penmanship Martha had always admired. Dear Isabella and Leo, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked perfectly. I heard your phone conversation about putting me in a nursing home because I'm becoming a burden. I heard you calculating how much money you'd make selling my house. The house has been sold for $890,000 cash. The money is safely in my new bank account where it will stay. I've moved to a place where I'm appreciated, not tolerated. Don't worry about me. Worry about your own housing situation. Your belongings have been packed and are being stored at Seattle Moving and Storage on Aurora Avenue North. You have 30 days to claim them before storage fees begin. I gave you everything I had for 42 years. You repaid me by planning to warehouse me so you could steal my life's work. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. Love, Dad. Thursday morning, the FedEx truck arrived at his apartment with a small box containing his surveillance equipment. He spent an hour in his kitchen testing the device and learning the smartphone app. The video quality was remarkably clear, the audio sharp enough to catch whispered conversations. Thursday afternoon, he drove to his former house for the last time. He used the garage door opener he'd never given Isabella and Leo, parking inside, to avoid questions from neighbors. His hands shook slightly as he approached the front door with his new keys. Inside, the house still smelled like home. Martha's lavender sachets, the lemon oil he used on the wooden furniture, the faint residue of 25 years of family dinners. But there were new additions that made his chest tight. Isabella and Leo's suitcases by the stairs, their mails scattered on the kitchen counter, evidence that they'd been treating his house as their personal storage facility. While planning his exile, he positioned the camera charger by the front door outlet, angling it perfectly to capture anyone entering. The view through his phone app showed the entire entryway, including the spot where he planned to hang his note. He tested the motion detection, walking in and out of frame until he was satisfied the system would capture every moment of their return. Then he taped the envelope to the inside of the front door at eye level, where they couldn't possibly miss it. Standing in his living room one final time, he touched the mantel where Martha's photo had sat for 23 years. The new owners would put their own family photos there, create their own memories in the rooms Martha and he had filled with love. "It's done, sweetheart," he whispered to Martha's memory. "Justice served." He locked the house with his new key, tested the camera feed one more time from his car, and drove back to his apartment. The motion detector was armed, the battery fully charged, and his phone ready to alert him the moment Isabella and Leo discovered their keys no longer worked. Back in his apartment, he sat in his chair with his phone in his hand, watching the empty doorway through the camera app. The timestamp showed 6:30 p.m., Thursday evening. Tomorrow, Isabella and Leo would return from their business trip, probably discussing their nursing home plans and already spending his money in their minds. They had no idea their grateful old father had become their worst nightmare. He woke Friday morning with the anticipation of a man about to witness justice after years of injustice. His coffee tasted better than it had in weeks, and even the small apartment felt less confining as he settled into his chair with his phone, the camera feed showing his empty former doorway. 30 p.m. They should arrive soon. He'd memorized their travel patterns. Isabella always insisted on leaving San Francisco by noon to avoid traffic, and Leo drove exactly the speed limit. They'd be pulling into his driveway within the hour. He looked at Martha's photo on his nightstand. "I hope you understand what I'm doing, honey." They left him. No choice. 15 p.m. His phone buzzed with motion detection. A black SUV, Leo's car, pulled into the driveway of his former house. His heart hammered against his ribs as he watched the screen. Isabella stepped out first, stretching after the long drive. Leo emerged from the driver's side, pulling their suitcases from the back. They moved with the casual confidence of people coming home to claim their inheritance. He watched them approach the front door, Isabella fishing her keys from her purse while Leo set the luggage down. She inserted her key into the lock had changed just yesterday. The key didn't turn. Isabella frowned, examining her key ring. She tried again, jiggling the key with growing frustration. "That's weird." Her voice came through his phone speaker. "My key's not working." Leo stepped closer, his expression shifting from tired to concerned. "Let me try the back door." He watched him disappear around the side of the house while Isabella continued struggling with the front lock. When Leo returned 3 minutes later, his face had darkened with alarm. "Back door's locked, too, and the garage remote isn't working." His voice carried the edge of panic he'd hoped to hear. "Isabella, someone changed these locks." "What? That's impossible. Dad doesn't even know any locksmiths." Leo studied the front door more carefully, his financial advisor's mind recognizing trouble when he saw it. "These are brand new locks. This isn't an accident." Isabella pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. "I'm calling Dad." He watched. Her dial his old landline, the number he'd had disconnected 3 days ago. After several rings, her face crumpled with confusion. No answer. It's not even going to voicemail. Try his cell phone. He doesn't have a cell phone, remember? We talked about getting him one for emergencies. Her voice cracked with the first hint of real fear. Leo was examining the windows now. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. "There, that one's unlocked. I can boost you up." He watched his daughter climb through the kitchen window he deliberately left unlatched, her business suit catching on the frame. She disappeared inside, and moments later, the front door opened. From within, Leo entered with their suitcases, and both of them stopped dead when they saw the white envelope taped to the door at eye level. Isabella's hand trembled as she pulled down the envelope with her name and Leo's written in his careful script. Arthur leaned forward in his apartment chair, phone clutched in both hands as she tore open the seal. Her eyes moved across his words, Leo reading over her shoulder. He watched their faces change, confusion to shock, to disbelief, to horror. He sold the house. Isabella's voice rose to a near shriek. "How could he do this to us?" Leo snatched the note from her hands, reading it again as if the words might change. "That manipulative old bastard, he was playing us the whole time." $890,000. Isabella was crying now, her careful makeup streaking down her cheeks. He kept it all. "That money was supposed to be our future." "Your future," Leo snapped, his mask of devoted son-in-law finally slipping. "This is your father, Isabella. You should have handled this better." "My fault?" She whirled on him, years of suppressed resentment boiling over. "You're the one who said he was becoming a burden. You're the one who pushed for the nursing home." "Well, he was a burden. Look what he's done to us." Leo gestured wildly around the room that was no longer theirs. "We're homeless. Our lease expires next week." The beautiful irony wasn't lost on Arthur. They were fighting in his living room about being homeless, just as they'd planned to make him homeless in their nursing home. "Call a lawyer," Isabella said desperately. "There has to be something we can do. He can't just sell the house without telling us." "With what money?" Leo's voice dripped with contempt. "In case you forgot, I lost my job 6 months ago, and your marketing salary barely covers our car payments." "Then get another job." "Where do you think? Financial firms aren't lining up to hire advisors who got fired for questionable transactions." He watched his daughter's face crumble as she realized the full scope of their situation. No house, no inheritance, no savings, and Leo's unemployable status finally revealed. "How could he be so cruel?" she whispered. "The same way you were cruel when you called him a burden and planned to warehouse him," Leo shot back. "The old man was smarter than both of us." Through his phone screen, he watched them collapse into his old furniture. Furniture that would be gone tomorrow when the new owners took possession. Isabella buried her face in her hands while Leo stared at his note with the expression of a man who'd finally understood he'd been outplayed. Arthur turned off the camera feed. He'd seen enough. Walking to his small kitchen, he opened the bottle of Martha's favorite wine he'd saved from the house, a 2018 Bordeaux they'd been saving for a special occasion that never came. He poured himself a glass and raised it toward Martha's photo. To you, my love, justice served. The wine tasted like victory. They learned what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Probably Isabella trying to reach him through some new method. He deleted it without reading and powered off the phone completely. Walking to his window, he looked out at the Seattle skyline painted gold by the setting sun. Somewhere across the city, his daughter and her husband were facing the consequences of their cruelty. Somewhere in his former house, they were learning that their burden had become their biggest problem. For the first time in 2 years since Martha's death, he felt completely free. He was no longer anyone's burden. He was his own man again, with his own money, his own choices, and his own future, stretching ahead like an open road. Arthur Hayes had left the building, and he was never coming back. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.